Switching your pet off of commercial food and onto raw food can feel like you're entering an entirely new world. What's the best way to start? For some, it may be frozen commercial raw food. For others, it may be homemade raw. But what are these raw feeding methods? And how does a beginner know which is best to use? Well, I'm going to show you 5 different ways you can start raw feeding so you can find out which method works best for your pet and lifestyle. Let's start with the most beginner-friendly method, the 80-20 method. If you're not ready to fully commit to feeding a raw diet, this is the method to start with. But how does it work? 80-20 means 80% of the diet is their current food and 20% is raw food. And this 20% can be anything from raw meat and organs, to meaty bones, to seafood, to all of these combined. Meaning this portion can be made up of ground beef, chicken neck, beef liver, and sardines each and every day. Or you can fill it with a single ingredient for simplicity and change it out every few days. Meaning you can feed just ground beef for a few days, then switch to sardines. But what if you want to feed more than 20% raw? Or want to feed fully raw? Well, if it's above 20% of the diet, the raw portion will need to start providing the calories and nutrients your pet needs daily to stay healthy. But if you're not ready to commit to learning how to balance a homemade diet yet, this next method may work best for you. Frozen Premade Raw. This is basically the meat, bone, and organ you would be feeding in the 80-20 method, but all ground up in specific portions. But which frozen pre-made raw food do you go with? Are they all the same? Well, not always. Sometimes these foods only contain muscle meat, bone, and organs, which is a great start, but is missing some ingredients that provide specific nutrients your pet needs. If you see frozen pre-made raw food that claims it's complete and balanced, this means it's most likely providing all of the nutrients your pet needs. When feeding frozen pre-made raw, just remove it from the freezer, let it thaw in the fridge overnight, then feed it. Okay, but what if you're not a fan of handling raw meat still? Is there any way you can feed raw without dealing with freezing, thawing, and touching cold raw meat? This may seem impossible, but not with this next method. FreezeDried Raw. This sounds very similar to frozen raw food. What's the difference? Yes, this raw food was frozen at one point, but there's a key difference. Once frozen, the moisture is then removed from it so it can be shelf-stable. Basically, this is like raw food, but without having to freeze, thaw, and keep it in the fridge. Freeze-dried raw food is usually already complete and balanced, so all you need to do is rehydrate it with water. This is a great method for owners who want to switch their pets to raw food, but aren't ready to handle fully raw meat yet. But what if you're someone who wants to take total control of your pet's diet and prepare the meal yourself using fresh whole food ingredients? Well, this brings us to homemade DIY raw. This means making the entire meal yourself so you know exactly what's going into your pet's body. But how are you supposed to know what to feed and how much? Well, there are a few models out there for beginners to follow. The first is Premade Raw, or PMR. PMR is made up of 80% muscle meat, 10% raw bone, 5% liver, and 5% other secreting organ. Sometimes other animal-based ingredients like seafood and eggs are added as well, but never any plant-based ingredients or supplements. It's a fine base to start with, but there's also the biologically appropriate raw food model, or BARF. BARF uses the PMR percentages, but also incorporates other whole foods. BARF's percentages are 70% muscle meat, 10% raw bone, 7% vegetables, 5% liver, 5% other secreting organ, 2% seeds or nuts, and 1% fruit. Both of these are a great place to start. But what if you want to be 100% sure that the diet is meeting your pet's specific nutrient and caloric needs? In this case, you'll want to go with complete and balanced DIY raw. Feeding a complete and balanced diet means you're providing all of the calories and nutrients that your pet needs to function. A problem that many vets have with homemade diets is that they can cause nutrient deficiencies. So it's a good idea to know what nutrients your pet needs and if your meals are providing them. This might sound complicated, but I'm going to show you that figuring this out is super simple. And after, I'll provide you with something that makes doing this even easier. So let's find out how to determine your pet's caloric and nutrient needs, then see how to find out what nutrients the foods you're feeding provide. We're going to use my dog Matsu as an example. Matsu is about 25 pounds or 11.3 kilograms. Here is the formula I need to find out how many calories he needs daily. I just need to plug in his weight in kilograms here, and this gives me the calories he needs for his body to function at rest. But Matsu isn't always at rest. In fact, no dog is ever completely at rest. So we need to factor in our pet's energy level to get an accurate amount of calories they need to maintain a healthy weight. To do this, reference this table. For average activity, use this number and plug it into this equation. Now I have Matsu's daily caloric needs. Next, I need to find out his nutrient needs. The NRC is who first determined the daily nutrient needs for dogs and cats. The other two common nutrient guidelines were created by AAFCO and FeedIfe, and use NRC's guidelines but tweaked it for commercial pet food. You can follow whichever you'd prefer, but I usually use NRC's. You can find AAFCO's nutrient guidelines here and FeedIfe's here. The NRC's guidelines are in this book, but I'll show the adult dog table here. Most of these nutrient tables are for pets who need 1,000 calories a day, but Matsu only needs 690. So to find out his individual nutrient needs, I just divide 690 by 1,000, and this gives me the number I need to multiply by each nutrient in the table. So if I want to find out Matsu's iron needs, I multiply this number by the iron requirement on the table, and that's how much iron Matsu needs daily. After this, you need to reference websites like Food Data Central and see how much of each nutrient the foods you're feeding provide per their weight. Now, I don't expect you to remember all of this. So I made simple cheat sheets for you so you can have all of these equations, nutrient guidelines, and many other helpful tips, reminders, and raw food information at your fingertips. If you'd like to take the dive into feeding homemade raw diets, you can download your cheat sheets below.